Welcome to De-Stress Your Business, the podcast where we show you how to get incredible results in your business without constant stress. I'm Alexis Kingsbury, a serial entrepreneur and founder at AirManual, and today I'm joined by a special guest, Shim Ravalia. Shim is a gut stress expert and holistic coach, the CEO and founder of the Gut Intuition, and the co-founder of Queens in Business Club. In this episode, I'll be asking Shim to share her experience on stress management, gut health, and achieving a healthy work-life balance to help business leaders and their teams prevent burnout and live more fulfilling lives. Shim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Alexis. Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited to talk about this. I absolutely love this topic, hence why I do what I do. So thank you so much for having me on here.
Brilliant. No, it's a pleasure. And let's dive into why this is such an area of interest for you. Can you tell us a bit about your journey, how you became a gut stress expert and holistic coach?
Absolutely. I'd have to take you back to 2018. So, prior to that, I ran a sports injury clinic for 6 years and made a lot of mistakes, wore many, many hats, and had my fair share of stresses of going through the roller coaster of, running a business. And it was through that experience where I actually stopped running that business and realized that my body was just crying out for help. You can imagine eating foods and reacting to everything that you were eating. Being an insomniac, couldn't sleep, and pain from head to toe, like all my joints were hurting, and I was putting on weight that I didn't realize that I was putting on weight, and started to really impact my mental health, started to really impact how I actually felt about myself. And I looked in front of the mirror and I was like, I don't know who I am anymore. Like almost I just felt I couldn't recognize myself because I was like, this is not me. And I realized that, going through sort of the functional medicine route, so I had somebody in my life at the time that, is a good friend today, but mentored me through, do you know what, you might want to have a look at gut health. Like, I think what you're telling me is not because it's lack of exercise or you're not eating the right foods. I think there's something deeper going on. I went, I am all ears because I'm really fed up with feeling like shit, basically. And I realised that I was carrying an infection for like 4 years. Wow. So imagine, it's still to this day, I think if I hadn't sorted it out, where would I be right now? I certainly wouldn't be on this podcast right now. And I realised I was carrying an infection that I was obviously created through the choices I made, through stress, through how I was running business at the time, and realised it had literally gotten under my skin. And I was like, how do I get rid of this infection? I don't want it in my body. And I had to go through, obviously, the holistic approach of really, really painfully looking at, okay, you got to sleep well. Not just catch up on sleep, but you've got to really sleep well. You've really got to look at your diet. You've got to really look at how you're feeding your body and fueling your brain. And you've really got to look at in your environment, and not just sort of your emotional, mental environment, but the actual environment that you actually live in. Like, what is around you that's creating a lot of toxicity in your life? And the people that you're talking to and the things that you're hearing and absorbing in your head and into your body, and all of this impacts us. It's not just what you eat and what you drink. There's so much more to this, and it really opened up a whole new world in my life. I was like, oh my god, this is what's going on. Like, does everyone know about this? No, they don't. And this is where the gut intuition was actually created from my own mess, if we really think about it. And since then, I just really kind of went down this rabbit hole of health and started mirroring. It's actually one of my biggest beliefs. How you run your health shows up in how you run your business. Yep. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I'm such a big believer in that. I'm like, interesting. And I really reflected back on like the times I was really stressed about money. What was actually going on? How was I really treating myself? Self-care wasn't there. I wasn't even scheduling it in. Like, I was like, no, I've got to make money. I've got to make sure my head's above water. My team is doing well. We've got all these overheads that are coming in. I've got to make sure it's all covered. And if it weren't, my pride would get in the way and I wouldn't ask for help because I didn't want to be seen as a failure. And that often, those sort of patterns can stress us out in business, which unfortunately keeps that stress switch on.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you've got all sorts of chronic problems coming out left, right, and centre. So that has been my journey in the last sort of from 2012 to 2018. And then when I let that stress go, I was like, okay, that's a bit of a breather. I don't have to run that business. I'm not passionate about it. But actually my body was like, you've got work to do. You've got to
Mm.
sort yourself out first, inside out. I was like, yes, I do. I really do. And I've been on this journey and I've been helping other business owners and really driven people that don't run businesses, but actually run sort of really career focused sort of 9 to 5 jobs, and even friends and family. Like my first ever client was my mum. And she was like, can you help me? Because I've got all these sorts of problems. I went, okay, sure, let's do it. And just really helped her out coming out of, like, she was carrying 2 parasites, and we don't even realize we're carrying all these wonderful things, which is causing us daily stress. We don't even know it. We're not even aware of it.
Mm.
So that has just been a roller coaster of a journey, and it continues to be a very roller coaster journey, because gut health, if anyone is listening to this, is a minefield. There is new microbiomes, new bacteria always being discovered all the time. And the more we understand how the gut brain connection actually is working for you and not working for you, you can make some pretty sound decisions in day to day life. Because that's essentially, when we look at gut health and gut bacteria, I would always argue, is it always in our head, or is it being fed by what the gut is actually telling us?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And I've had some wonderful conversations with mindset gurus and mindset coaches, and yes, I believe the thought is created up here, but what's driving it further? Is it our thoughts continuously, or is there something else going on with our microbiomes that are finding it?
Oh, there's so many areas I could dive into now, because there's one angle which, like as you mentioned there specifically, the
Yeah,
almost that feedback mechanism, the intuition, that feeling in your gut, and also the how your gut supports you in your decision making and so on.
yeah,
And I seem to remember reading somewhere like the nerve endings that you have. For most parts of your body, it tends to be sort of one way, right? Like in terms of sending messages to parts of your body to do things, and
yeah,
then very basic kind of feeling, touching, pain receptors that go back. Whereas there's this really interesting, weird mix of a large quantity of nerve endings and thing being like sent from the gut area and from your stomach and so on back, which seems odd, particularly given that most of the time you don't feel what's going on in, like, if you could feel every single part of food going through your intestines, I think it'd be incredibly distracting. And yet there's all these these neural pathways that are kind of designed for it.
yeah,
So I think there's a whole area I could go down around there around asking about that. I think the other area that I'm interested in is that the kind of balance of, when we talk about gut health and stress and so on, there's kind of
yeah,
a more mental, touchy-feely part of that, which is when you feel stressed, how that then affects you. But then
yeah,
you've talked about literal infections, and I
yeah,
don't know, bacterial or viral infections, but then also like literal parasites,
yeah,
which are present. And of course, as you say, microbiomes. Like, we know that bacteria, good bacteria, as we're often told, is important. In fact, I had a conversation with the kids this morning where we were discussing whether, if hypothetically you could kill all the bacteria in your body, could you continue existing, or would you die too? And so there's whole loads of
wow,
different areas
yeah.
that I would very happily dive into with you, Shim. So let's take one of those for me. Help me pick this apart. Where would you suggest that we start, when, particularly given that in this episode we're going to be talking about the connection between gut health and stress management? Where do we start with all that?
Yeah, let's start with stress. I think it's relatable to everyone that is going to be listening to this podcast and everyone that's live right now. Stress is I always kind of start with that. Stress generally is just a natural human response to a challenge or a threat that's
Yep.
it's we're facing, basically. In this day and age, it can be emails. That's a stress response, and it could be like, being in front of our laptops. It could be lack of exercise. It could be too much exercise. It could be a whole host of things. If we go back to the caveman days, and when we were hunting for food, stress could be a tiger that we're about to get into a fight with.
Yeah.
So it's our version of stress is very different to where life used to be many, many years ago. So it's literally just a natural response, human response that we are faced with when we're facing a threat or a challenge. Now, when you see stress, I find that in conversations, and I'm always sort of not eavesdropping, but I always hear the word stress pop up. Yeah, I'm just a little bit stressed. And I just think we need to dive and take that a bit more seriously when we're talking to one another. Even if you're talking with a friend and they said, I'm really stressed, like actually ask them, or, depending on the closeness of that relationship, it's like, what are we stressed about? Like, where do you, what is stress? Because stress is such a broad, it's as broad as when we talk about the weather. When you really think about it, I was like, yeah, the weather's looked good today. Yeah, I'm just a bit stressed today. It's just as loose and as anything. And I just think, even if you just understand that part, as in, okay, self-awareness. I said I'm feeling stress. What am I stressed about?
Yeah.
What is actually stressing me out? The more we address that and have that approach and that attitude, the better awareness we have. Because without awareness, you cannot possibly take a different course of action. And then if we go into the physical part of stress, I look at stress as a switch. Okay. The switch, if you push it forward, is your fight, flight, or freeze response. Mm-hmm. And if you switch it back, it's rest and digest. So the parasympathetic system. Okay. So you got the fight or flight and freeze, and then you got the rest and digest. And we should have a balance of that switch going on and off, on and off. The key problem we have today is that switch is constantly on.
Yeah.
Which means when it's constantly on, we start to get a lot of signal failures within our body, a bit like the red traffic light system. It's constantly red, which means more chronic problems, more chronic metabolic disorders are happening within the body, and we don't even realize it. And we're just going and going. We're busy running our businesses. We're busy being busy. We're busy being people pleasing, all this sort of stuff. We're busy doing admin all the time, and we haven't actually come up to take a bit of breath of air, or taken a bit of rest, or taken a day off or two, or actually just changed our environment for the day. And that switch is just on, which means we are faced now with more problems. There's a higher percentage of you actually experiencing a health-related issue more than where you were about a year ago or 6 months down the line. So awareness when it comes to stress and how that connects with our body is super, super, super crucial. Like, even if you're running a business or you're not running a business and you're in a 9-to-5 job, or you're kind of a freelancer, whatever it may be, stress affects everybody. Stress affects animals. It's part of our lifestyle. Stress, actually, when we take away, if we just put it to the side of what I just spoke about, stress is actually our survival instinct. Without stress, we just wouldn't be alive. We need it. It's a chemical release. It's cortisol at the end of the day. But there are so many distractions. We live in a digital world right now. There are a lot of blinkly lights. There's a lot of alerts happening every single day that keeps that fight or flight response on. So you remember the switch and on and off? That switch is constantly on. So what do we need to do now to get that balance back from on to off, and then back on again, and off and back on again? Because stress keeps us alert. It's the adrenaline, isn't it? But imagine just being adrenaline fueled. Your body's full of that cortisol chemical. How do you flush it out? How do you get back into rest and digest? So I just think it's a fine balancing act, but that balancing act can only come from when you're aware of your own stresses, not just physical stresses, but emotional, mental stresses as well.
Yeah, and in terms of like that self-awareness, as you say, it kind of starts off with that, I guess, checking in with yourself, being aware of how you're feeling, and either expressing it to someone else and having that conversation about what actually is causing the stress, or whatever. Like, do you think, can you feel the stress in your gut? Like, when you talk about gut intuition and the scenario that you've spent a lot of time sort of studying and kind of spending time on, how can someone like become aware of how they're experiencing stress and what's causing it?
Yeah, stress is really clever. It shows up in so many different ways. So some typical ways that it shows up, and I'll give you guys a quick tip, because this has really helped me, particularly when At the time, I weren't really sure how to talk about my stress to somebody that could totally understand or just hear me out and with no judgment, right? So stress can show up in different ways. So stress can show up like, for example, dark circles around our eyes. That's when you know when you're sort of really stressed out, like your adrenals are quite suppressed. Bloating, feel like your jeans don't fit, eczema, psoriasis around our joints, even like itchy skin or redness at the back of your arms. These are all telltale signs of inflammation coming up in your body. Even if you're getting blotchy sort of skin marks, like blood marks in your skin, you know, when you're like, you think, oh, it's my circulation, I'm really cold, but it's on a hot day, and you're like, well, that doesn't quite sort of fit around. Even if when you hear somebody go, well, actually, my nose, tip of my nose is always cold, and I just don't know why, or my ears are really cold, or my hands and feet are always cold all year round, I'm freezing. These are all telltale signs that there's a disbalance, there's a dis-ease going on in the body. It's not at ease anymore, it's a disconnect. So how do we get that connection back? Even things like alopecia, have you ever walked into a room and you've forgotten what you wanted to say and you're like, I'm going to have to retrace my steps again? You know, this is all to do with brain health and how the connection is happening with the gut and the brain. Even hair loss, thinning hair, all of these things. Bad breath, gum disease, eye health, like waxy ears, like these are all kind of brilliant signs for us to just be really aware. All the body ever really does every single day is just communicate with us. Symptoms are not something we need to be scared of. Symptoms are something that your body is just saying, hello, remember this, what you created, you need to do something about it. No, not today. Okay, I'll come back a week later and I'll tell you a little bit more painful. Like if you've not heard the silent knock, it's just going to go even louder and louder and louder. And it's all it's telling you is like, hey, Alexis, you need to do something about this. Come on, let's do something together, because right now I'm not happy. My body, this home is not happy, and we need to do something. And I said I'd talk about a quick tip. So I love body scanning, and this is something that you can just do 5 minutes, even while you're listening to this podcast. Like if you lie flat on the floor or on the bed or even just sitting on a chair and just close your eyes and just start with a couple of deep breaths and just really get into this lovely rhythm of just deep breaths in, deep breaths out, and just turn your attention, your focus onto your neck, your shoulders, and slowly move down your elbows, your fingers, your arms, all the way down to your toes, and then up and down again. What you're essentially doing there is you're creating awareness and actually feeling any sensations. And it could be tightness, it could be how would I put it, a lack of movement in certain areas. You might feel a little bit like, oh, that's a bit niggly in that area, or oh, my lower back is feeling a little bit painful in this way, and maybe I need to bend my knees. Like all these are telltale signs of where we need to just sort of focus on right now. And imagine what you see in front of the mirror every single day. Yeah, that's you and your body and the skin, but I want you to really focus on that. There's layers and layers and layers. So when I looked at my infection 4 years ago, well, yeah, that was a deeper layer that I went down to, but I had to look at other layers as time went on, and more layers and more layers.
Yeah, I love that, and I've that technique of that body scanning. Like, I've seen that exist in some forms of mindfulness and use
Yeah.
like meditation and so on, and found it really powerful, even just as a method of relaxing. But I really like that that approach, as kind of using it as an opportunity to check in. And it's funny when you talk about that, those symptoms of stress and using them as just indicators. It kind of makes me think of like either whether it's a dashboard of key performance indicators, or whether it's your dashboard if you're flying a plane or driving a car. It's essentially checking in with that, right? It's like looking at, okay, let me just check these things and make sure everything's going okay. And actually, if I am regularly feeling, as you say, cold extremities or tightness in particular muscles, etc. And I think it's really interesting, like perhaps previously, I think to a disproportionate degree, I think if I was identifying those symptoms, I would assume more a sort of, oh, maybe there's maybe I've got some circulation issue, maybe, I've got a posture issue and so on. And of course, those can be the cause, but actually adding in is there a stress component to this that's showing up as well is a really interesting dynamic of that.
Yeah.
You talked about how when the symptoms show up, there's a tendency for us to go away symptom. Like it's not helpful to me right now that I'm, having palpitations or feeling cold or whatever it is. I need to get this, I need to get this report done. I need to get this proposal out. I need to, prepare for my presentation, whatever it is. That's a tricky thing to overcome, particularly as business leaders. There are times when we do have to suddenly go for, and hit deadlines. In fact, in episode 50 of the podcast, I spoke to Paul Avens about, sometimes, as you said too, like sometimes stress is good and useful and it provides indicators, and sometimes you need that adrenaline. The trick is, as you put it, not having that switch set to on all the time.
Yeah.
So for the busy business owners who and business leaders who are listening to this thinking, I get it. Yes, I'm probably too stressed at the moment. Yes, it's impacting my health and I can feel it. And I am maybe a little bit more worried than I'd like to admit about what it means for my long-term health. In fact, I reminded of my interview with Jonathan Jay, in which his stress and lack of work-life balance and so on put him in hospital. There are loads of examples where business leaders have taken this to the max, but then at the same time they'll be feeling like, yeah, but I need to hustle, I need to get this work done and so on. So how do we resolve that? How do we is there a point at which a lack of work-life balance, this amount of stress, actually is detrimental to our productivity, short term, medium term, long term, and means that actually it's a bad choice to live with that stress on an ongoing basis?
You know what? It's interesting when you say work-life balance. I think work-life balance is BS in the entrepreneurial world. I don't understand why entrepreneurs talk about we need work-life balance. I'm like, well, you're an entrepreneur. That doesn't exist. What I'm saying is, as an entrepreneur, it's a responsibility that if you're going to be running a business and you're providing solutions and you're making a difference and an impact in the world, you need to find your own balance and own it.
Mm-hmm.
Like work-life balance, I used to hear a lot of this when I had my full-time job many, many years ago. I was like, yeah, I need to achieve work-life balance. And everyone that you speak to, like realistically, everyone is still trying to find it today. We're 2023 and we're still talking about work-life balance. Do you see what I mean? I think balance comes from when you are extremely aware and you know what you need to do next to actually create that holistic approach, that balance back into your body. How do you reconnect back to ourselves? Essentially, the reason why we go through a disbalance in life and we feel unfulfilled or we don't feel happy or we've got all sorts of health challenges is because once upon a time we've forgotten to connect with our bodies, we've forgotten to connect with ourselves. And we may have my first business, I bottlenecked that business model to a point where I had no time. That's on me because I created that. Therefore, the unhappiness of that choice showed up in my business, showed up in my bank account. So
yeah, and I guess so as a result, instead of work-life balance, you'd be looking at more a balance of stress and regeneration and digesting, right? It's more about how you, as you say, take a more holistic approach, so that it's not about are you working or are you having life. It's more about how you make sure that your work isn't constantly stressful, and the same for your life. I guess when I think about work-life balance, I'm thinking about how I'm balancing my time and energy and focus and making sure that I'm like giving enough time to relationships and my health and so on. But I think you pointed a really interesting point there, which is like that it almost suggests that your work is then completely separate to those things, which isn't accurate. It needs to be more holistic than that. So that's interesting. Like, and so how does that then show up? Like, if we take a different approach then, so rather than looking at it as there's work and then there's life, and instead we're looking at actually it's about balancing your time. It's about making sure that you haven't got the switch always set to on. It's about being more aware. How does that then impact your productivity, your ability to be successful and to hustle in those moments that you need to, but also not turn that into a stressful situation constantly.
Yeah, I mean, the best tip I can give is like, you know how much we are glued to our diary, scheduling this and scheduling that? Well, how about we schedule a bit of self-care in there as well?
Mm.
You know, it's you don't often see it in someone's diary as in, yeah, I've got these amount of meetings, but this is where I'm going to have lunch. This is where I'm going to go for my walk. This is where I'm going to de-stress and maybe have a little nap. I don't know what that might be. Like, I think it's really important that as much as we dedicate our time to our business because it's our passion and we are creating solutions and we're making a big difference, well, you're the driver. So you still got selfishly, in the right ways and the right reasons, look after yourself as well.
Mm.
So how are you going to continue growing and scaling that business if you're not going to continue growing and scaling yourself? Remember what I said is like, how you do one thing is how you show up and do everything else. So I just think if with the similar approaches that we run our businesses, do it for yourself too. Like, numbers don't lie in business, right? It shows you how healthy your business is, the cash flow and everything. Well, numbers don't lie in health either. Like, when we go for blood tests, we go for lab tests and things like that, you're going to get a load of numbers and they're going to say something. Those numbers don't, they don't lie. Results never lie at the end of the day. So take this sort of similar approach with our health too. That's where you'll find true balance. That's when you realize that actually I don't need this cookie cutter approach that I have to do
Mm.
X, Y, and Z sessions at the gym, or I need to go and do 15,000 steps a day and then do gym workout and then spend Sunday prepping my meals. Like, it's not for everyone, but find something that works for you so
Yeah.
you come away from the dysfunctional way of running business and your health and more functional. So you are being you, your best version of you, not just for yourself and your clients and your business, but for your family too. That's the biggest difference.
Yes, and I think I love the time blocking approach. I think it's
Mm.
so useful. Like it's funny
Yeah.
when you list out some of the things. I literally do have those in my calendar, including lunch and stopping work at the end of the day and bringing the calm and being with the family and all that kind of
Love
stuff,
it.
so that it doesn't, because otherwise it can, right? Like Parkinson's law, the work will always swell to fill the time that's available. And yet
Yeah.
the opposite is true. Like when you time block, suddenly you can get the work done. And I have some team members, having a walk some point in the day is important. And so, like my co-founder, for him, he has walk at a point in the day. I have mine at the start of the day, and as you say, it's about finding what kind of works for you
Yeah.
to make that fit. So I really like that, and I think I really like as well how you're highlighting, like, this is something that is really important for you to put in place so that it works for you long term, so that you can be productive and that you
Yeah.
are able to bring your best self, as you say, like how you show up and how you deliver, both with your family, with your work, like the creativity you bring is hugely impacted by all
Yeah.
of that. Are there any other ways in which you'd suggest that a business leader can perhaps quickly improve their overall well-being and perhaps that of their team? We've talked a bit about time blocking and perhaps encouraging that. It's something that we do with our own teams and our direct reports, is to
Yeah.
say, make sure that you're putting in some time for exercise and rest and whatever. I remember us writing an article for our team at one point, like almost as part of our HR policy, which is take an umbrella, which was in response to occasionally having team members who are like, oh, I'm feeling lethargic, I need to do some exercise. And we'd say, oh, have you been for a walk? And they go, oh, it's raining. And it's like, take an umbrella. Like, this
Yeah.
is important. Like, you can stop work, pick up an umbrella and go for that walk, because you will feel
I
better.
love
And that's
that.
a good thing for you and the company. But
Yeah.
like, what other, you've worked with so many business leaders on these sorts of
Yeah.
challenges. What are some of the ways in which business leaders can, get improvements both for them and for their teams?
Yeah, so look, I'll give you a couple of tips around like the quick and easy stuff, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
there's other stuff that I would say that I've definitely put myself through because I was really aware of some of these patterns that were driving my health to the ground. So it goes without saying, and these are not like magic answers, and they're not
Mm.
like, oh my God, I didn't think of that. It's already there. We're just not utilizing it as best as we can. Sleep is one of them. Like, I think that the stats have now changed, but I know small business trends back in 2021, so in the heart of lockdown, they literally released a study that self-employed people, business owners, will 70% of them will work past their bedtime, so into the early hours of the morning. So they'll start really early in the morning, and then they'll finish like really late into the sort of early hours of the morning on the next day. And that really alarmed me, and I was like, how do you then be more visible in your business? How are you even present when you're talking to your next best client, or when you're networking, or your team really need you? Like, so my biggest tip is like really just get into the habit, and this is all about habits, right? Get into a habit of just switching off an hour before you need to go to bed. Like, the things that you're worrying about right now, I know it's a lot easier said than done, but just get into a habit of just leaving it to the next day. I understand as a business owner, some things cannot be left to the next day. I get it. And we might have to do it there and then. But it's the consistency of that that often makes or breaks the success of the next day. So if we get into a habit of, well, actually, I can leave it to the next day, brilliant, which means I get an extra hour in bed, brilliant, I'll do that. But the moment we are consistent and loyal to going, no, I've got to do this now, I've got to do this now, I've got to do this now, we end up just falling short on getting the rest that we truly need. Would you agree with me, Alexis? Like,
100%.
with running a business, our brains are on fire. We
Yeah.
are leaders. We are constantly going from left to right to right to left, dealing with teams, dealing with challenges, dealing with wins, like all sorts of things, right?
And yes, and there's always more you can do. Like,
Yeah,
when sometimes, if my wife says, "Oh, is there some work? Do you need to work, or is there some, like some work you need to do?" It's like there's always work I can do. Like
yeah,
it's not like an employee or a contractor who's got very defined tasks, and once it's done, it's done. There is
yeah,
always something else I could do, and so it does require incredible discipline to say no if it's not done. In fact, I remember one from my client saying, if you can't get it done, if you can't get it done in 5, then you're not going to get it done in 6. Or like if you can't get it done in 6, you're not going to get it done in
it's so
7. They're
true.
talking about days, right? And they're
Yeah,
talking about like not eating your weekend, which I think I'm often surprised at how many business leaders are working crazy hours, are working crazy days. I think
yeah,
to some extent, I almost feel like I've lost some of that memory of what that was like in my early days,
mm,
because in my case, like I nearly lost the most important relationship in my life as a result of going down that route, and as a result made some big changes in my life and haven't gone back. Right, I think I work probably 37 and a half hours a week. Never work weekends. I tend to work mornings when the kids wake up, when I'm excited and energetic, and then I switch off 5:30 p.m. Done. Go be with the kids, and
yeah,
I don't go back to the office. And despite being home office, and yet for me, that's all just like nah. That's like normal. And yet, I know so many business leaders not in that situation, both entrepreneurs, business owners, but also people working within corporates,
yeah,
where for various reasons, time zones, amount of work, they're working like either early or late or both, and sometimes weekends or often weekends.
yeah,
And I think the way that you say it is so powerful. Like it becomes the norm. I remember talking to a business leader who she said that she was wanting to work with us at AirManual because she said, like, I need to change what I'm doing. Like, I have literally got health issues that have come about from stress,
yeah,
and I need to delegate. I need to hand stuff to other people, and I'm really struggling. So that's why we want to work together. And I said, well, you told me that due to health, you can't work as many hours as you'd like to. And so that's already holding you back. Like, how many hours are you currently able to work? And I was kind of expecting it to go like, if I work 3 hours, my energy just drops to the floor, and as a result, I can't work for the rest of the day and so on. That was actually
mm,
expecting where she was saying, do you know how many hours she told me that she was working, like what she was able to work each day? 10 hours. And I'm thinking, well, you're already working like 3 hours more than I am each day, and yet you're a guy in this
yeah,
with limited working, right? And it's like no wonder why health becomes an issue and so on when we're pushing ourselves this hard. And
yeah,
that's with her thinking, ideally, I'd be working like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So
yeah,
I 100% agree with you, Shim. Like changing bedtime and setting a bedtime and starting that wind down process? I mean, you said 1 hour. I'd be advocating for multiple hours beforehand,
Yeah.
but I think you have to start somewhere, right? Because
Yeah.
meet people where they are. So I love that as a suggestion. We're going to run short on time, but give me another one, and then I want to perhaps explore some of your 7
Yeah,
steps
sure.
system as well.
So I think a lot of the times when we're knackered and we just really need to focus, we really just need to get through the day, because let's face it, we do have those days. And I think the amount of choices we make through how we're feeding ourselves, how we start our days, will determine how we finish our evening. So if we're going without breakfast, if we're going without food, and we're just really, really kind of on the Red Bull and the caffeine kicks and things like that, you've got to really seriously ask yourself, is that nutritious? And I'm not sort of judging anyone that's doing it right now. That's not the point here. I'm just saying that there comes to a point where if you've been doing it for a long time, you will get to a point where you're just sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. And this is your wake up call to go, well, if I'm feeding myself in this way or lack of, and I want X, Y, and Z results and I'm not getting there, what am I doing wrong? And look, you and I both know, we've heard this along a lot of the time, every problem is a leadership problem. So, when you look at how you're, leading yourself, leading your teams, and you're seeing all these issues, it always comes back to you. And I actually find that really peaceful, because I'm like, I just have to deal with myself. I don't have to deal with anyone right now, because if I just look at myself for a second, then I can understand where I'm contributing to some of these issues in my business or in my personal life. So I just think the biggest tip I can give is just really look at how you're starting your day. I mean, be really mindful. Are we getting out of bed like, oh my God, I've got half an hour. I just got to really get to this meeting. Let me just quickly put a nice top on. I've still got my PJs on. It's only Zoom. Or we're running late to a meeting, or we're starting the day with full-blown exercise and then a protein shake to where we need to go, and then we're skipping lunch and we're kind of having late dinners and things like that, which can happen. What I'm saying is that I don't want you to anyone listening to this right now, I'm not saying it's wrong. What I'm saying is that when we get into the pattern of doing it consistently is where signal failures happen in our bodies. Okay, it happens. We all have different ways of dealing with this. We all have shortcuts here and there, and that's okay. We're only human. We're not meant to have it all figured out every day. What I'm saying is that just be aware of how often we're doing it, because it's the chronic habits that lead us to chronic issues and chronic health concerns. So if we reverse engineer that process, we can actually find the answers. I always say the answer's always right under your nose, and it literally is. It's always in front of us. And I just think some of these approaches that I've just talked about, which scheduling in self-care, sleep, looking at really aware of how you're starting your day, how you're feeding your body and fueling your brain, you probably might be thinking, well, that's quite obvious. I was thinking more of a magic answer. I'm sorry to say, there isn't one. These are some of the foundations of health that, unfortunately, within health and wellness industry over the years, often gets misconstrued as, no, it's not that. You just need to take this supplement and you're good as gold. Or do this 2-3 times a day and you're going to get X, Y, and Z result. And I'm like, that's just a lot of BS. I had this really good chat with a physio recently, and we got talking about gut health, and he went, you know what? The reason why people don't go down this route? And I said, yeah, enlighten me. And he was just like, because it's not sexy. And I was just like, that's really interesting you say that. You're right. A lot of this work that actually gives us long-term results is not sexy work. We do have to roll our sleeves up and actually do the work. And as a business owner, if we're already spending so many hours in our business and we're like, oh, I've really got to do this, I've got to do a 40-hour week this week, I've got to build my team, or the team a team leader's not well, or they've gone on holiday, so I have to pick up the pieces. Imagine just, we're doing things that we're competent at but we're not really enjoying it. And guess what? And you want to work on your health, it just looks and feels like more work. And I think we forget to play, and I just think play is a huge part of this as well, having fun. But yeah, that's my tips.
Yeah, I love that, Shim. It's so insightful, and it strikes me that when we were talking about having you on the podcast. It was really interesting because I think often the approach that I tend to take when I'm talking about stress in the business, and as we
Yeah.
talk about like an AirManual and so on, is about how do you put the systems, the processes in your business to
Yeah.
reduce, avoid, mitigate the stress. Like how do you
Mm.
make it so your business isn't dependent on you? Because otherwise, if it is dependent on you, that's stressful because you can't even go on holiday without it disturbing
Yeah.
you. Or how do you reduce the amount of time you need to spend on it? Because if you're constantly required and you're working all hours, and like we put in processes, the routine, like the routines and so on in your business, the structure in your business, so that it reduces the stress. What strikes me is that what you're describing, putting in the habits, the personal routines that get you the consistent results, as you say, not sexy, but we know in so many parts of our lives that that's the answer. Like I've got
Yeah.
a mentor that says making money is boring. Like done properly, making money is boring. If making money is exciting, then it is short lived. Like it's exciting to win the lottery, but most lottery winners lose the money, right? It's
Yes, so true.
exciting to have a big event that you run, get a load of money, but what are you going to do a year from now?
Yeah.
Whereas take it like earning a decent income each month and putting a percentage of that into savings and doing that every single month for 10 years until you've got like a property portfolio that provides you a passive income, boring as hell,
Yeah.
but likely to create a very successful financial and low stress life for you. But it needs that consistency. And the same for like fitness. We know that going on a 300-mile run is not how you get fit. You have to
No.
go on 100 3-mile runs and do that every single day. And it's and I think, as you say, the same goes for your gut health and stress management, for putting in those routines, those processes, those habits in your
Yeah.
life so that you're managing that. And I know that you've got a 7 steps to from stress to success system,
Yeah.
which can really help with people with this. We're probably not going to get time to go deep into all of those areas. If you
Yeah.
can maybe give us what are the 7 and where can people find out more, that'd be really helpful.
Absolutely. Like I think I've mentioned it throughout our conversation today. So the
Yeah,
first
we've
one
done quite
is
a few.
stresses. Yeah, quite a few. So we kind of hit it anyway. So stress is one of the ones. One of the 7 steps of the stress to success. Like just really understanding what are your stress levels. Like yeah, we got physical stress, but they are heavily driven by emotional and mental stress, but also what is your gut telling you, what is your gut saying to you. Your intuition is always going to be guiding you in the best way possible. The other one is sleep. I spoke about sleep a lot as to really just learning and getting into the habit and the discipline and respecting your own boundaries when it comes to switch off time. So that's 2. Sugar. Now, we didn't really go into sugar because that actually ties in with productivity a lot, but just really understanding what are your sugar levels throughout the day and how does that tie in with your productivity levels? Because if we're having these crashes, imagine what happens to your productivity level. So how can we improve it by 20 to 30%? And I think that's a conversation for another day. But stamina, which I talked about, which is all about food, how you're fueling your body, how you're starting your day, which we definitely spoke about. Shifting is all about movement. How do we shift from one place to another? And I don't mean about gym workouts, but literally, how do you get away from the laptop scene, your office environment every day that you spend hours and hours, and actually go and move? Go and move and go for a walk out into nature, or just for a 5-10 minute walk and get some daylight in you. That's super important to understand how you are starting and kickstarting your day. First thing, your surroundings. I talked about environment a lot. Like it's huge. Like even if your room is a mess, just start by decluttering that. You'll feel so much better by the time you get to bed. And there's a lot more to that, but I'll definitely give some pointers and how you guys can find out more. And then last but not least is all about survival. And what I mean by survival is hydration, right? So I'm not saying go and drink 8 glasses of water. I'm just like really focus on how are you drinking water, the quality of water, and just really flushing out the toxins every single day. It's not just 8 glasses or a litre. Like you've really got to get in, again, consistent habit, discipline of just making sure that you're hydrated. Because even as little as 3% dehydration can really affect how we are being visible, how we are being connecting to one another, and how we just connecting to ourselves. 3% dehydration can really affect your focus. And you're like, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to leave it for another day. And just sort of putting it out there, hydration does not include tea and coffee. Just saying it. I mean, like water on its own, not including your Red Bulls or your protein shakes and things like that. I'm just saying
It does
quality.
include beer, obviously.
Sorry?
But does include beer. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, beer has water. I mean, without that, you wouldn't have beer. But all joking aside, I'm just talking about quality water going into your body. So yeah, overall, that was very quickly just going over the entire stress to success system. These are like, I'm serious. Like, if you do these right, you'll start to feel such a difference within yourself. And when you feel that positive difference in yourself, no word of a lie, you will show up differently in your business. You'll show up differently to your friends and family, your team. You'll want to do more because you found that bit of love for yourself because you're looking after yourself. So it just makes a huge impact. It's not a sexy system, just saying it, but it is a very important system that if you really want to do things right for yourself and find the balance that works for you, look at the foundations of health that's always been there.
Love it so much. Thank you so much, Shim, and thanks for sharing that. And I think those 7 steps are so powerful. How can people learn more about the 7 steps? Learn more from you, and also, you're a founder of the Queens in Business Club. There are the other Queens in Business that are part of that group. How can we learn more about your work there? What the other Queens in Business are doing, and as I say, more about the 7 steps, because
absolutely, like
more.
Yeah, I mean, I hang around on LinkedIn, so connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll send you the link to Alexis, and when this podcast comes out, there'll be a link in there. And just send me a DM and just say hello and how you found out about us, and if you're on the De-Stress Your Business podcast, and then I'll know where you come from, and then we'll just hang out there, and I'll share my 7-step system. You can go and have that PDF and just go and apply it. Honestly, like, just use that to your own advantage and just start applying it, and you'll notice a difference straight away.
Fantastic. Love it. Yeah. So connect with Shim on LinkedIn, send her a message, ask her for the 7 Steps for Success PDF, and and find out more. Love that. Thank you so much, Shim. It's been so good talking to you. You've delivered so much value as expected. So I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining me.
No, thank you for having me. It's been so much fun hanging out, talking about all gut things related and stress. And hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll have a different approach and attitude towards stress, and you can do something about it. So thank you.
Fantastic. Absolutely love it. No, it's been really good. And for those that have listened to this podcast before, you'll know that we run a regular webinar, or I run a regular webinar, sadly not with Shim, although we'll have to do that. We'll have to get one scheduled. But the webinar that I run typically weekly is on how to free up 15 hours a week, remove the constant stress of running a business, and unlock growth. You can find out when the next one is and register at airmanual.co/webinar. And also a final note, if you found today's episode useful, and come on, you have, this has been hugely valuable. I massively appreciate the time that Shim's taken to share so much great guidance with us. If you found it useful, just take a moment, either send us a message, post it on social media. If you can share perhaps a key takeaway that you got, or something that was particularly useful, really appreciate it. It makes a big difference to us. And in fact, I can see, we've, as well as this being recorded as a podcast, we did run it as a LinkedIn Live, and I can see we've had a few comments. Thank you so much, Francis. Thank you very much, Shizuru. Really appreciate people commenting as we're doing it live, but please do also post and share it. Share this episode with more people. It helps us and it helps them. So it's worthwhile doing. Otherwise, Shim, thanks again so much for joining me. It's been great having you on the podcast. I really appreciate it. But otherwise, everyone else, until next time, have fun. Thanks, Shim.
Yeah.